The rebirth of Israel in 1948 was the super sign. There have been wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and persecution of believers for the last 2,000 years. What we haven't seen happen in the context of all the other prophecies coming true is we haven't seen, until 62 years ago, the rebirth of the state of Israel.
The people very clear in what they're saying. They want President Mubarak to go.
Protesters and security forces battle on the streets of Suez.
Those who seek to destroy us, they don't hide their intentions. They're very clear.
They want to become the final empire.
We knew that these countries in the Middle East were tinder boxes that were about to explode.
We could see the end of the royal family in Saudi Arabia in the near future.
We have in Turkey the rise of the new Adolf Hitler of the Middle East. No one is paying attention.
When you look at Jordan, King Abdullah is hanging by a thread right now.
We've been seeing so much turmoil in Libya.
Famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in many places at the same time.
We're getting close to a very cataclysmic moment or series of moments.
I wasn't exactly sure what to do or where to go. I'd never been prepared for anything like this.
There are many of us who feel this is a precursor to the Messianic period.
When people ask me if I believe we're living in the last days, my answer is yes. Why? Wars, rumors of wars, the rise of false prophets, false religions, false messiahs, persecution of the believers, earthquakes, natural disasters, famines, rise of lawlessness, crime, and you can pretty much go through that list and go check, 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 check.
I'm convinced after 60 years of studying Bible prophecy that we're very close to the end of time.
Time. Our lives are based on it. How long can I play, watch TV? How long will it take to get there? How long do I have to live? And the most philosophical and vexing question, how long will this last? The concept of forever is not easily grasped. By nature, we are always contemplating the end of whatever it is we're doing, sometimes in positive ways, other times not. It's not surprising then that throughout history, with every turn for the worst, some have proclaimed with steadfast conviction that doomsday, or at least the end of the earth as we know it, was imminent. Today is no exception. The Middle East is in chaos, threatening the security of Israel and the world's access to oil. Communist China is on its way to supplanting America as the world's pace setter. And the global economy continues to hang by a tenuous thread. For many people of faith, specifically for those who follow Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, present-day conditions represent just the latest chapter in a series of events foretold by each religion's prophets.
There's no question at this point that all three major monotheistic religions believe increasingly that the signs of the last days are in motion.
I sit with members of the evangelical community, and while we differ in our interpretation of the end of days, the eschatological view of time, there are many of us who feel this is a precursor to the Messianic period.
And you're seeing a dramatic explosion of literature in the Jewish world, in the Muslim world, and certainly in the Christian world, about prophecy, obviously from different angles. I would say in the last decade, just a spike in interest that I'm not sure I can fully explain, except the general sense that I think people sense something's coming.
Rosenberg says even Hollywood's orientation over the last few years points to a knowing, a sense of things to come. He cites as evidence the string of blockbuster movies focusing on the epic battle between good and evil.
One of the things that really intrigues me, I have to say, is how much interest there is in Bible prophecy. How much interest there is, yes, among lay people, but even among world leaders, among military leaders, among intelligence officials. I get invited to speak to members of Congress, to world leaders. Is there any source of information that can give us a sense of what's coming in the future and what it means?
The curiosity, the frantic search for answers, is due in large part to the historic upheaval in the Middle East. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, what little stability existed in that region was destroyed, and all previous assumptions rendered meaningless. All in the name of democracy.
They use these as tools, as vehicles, to put into place their concepts of Islamic law. And ultimately, they are a political party with a platform. And they have hatched radical movements from Hamas to Islamic Jihad.
It is scary to me when I watch Western media talk about the democracy movement in the Middle East. I remember watching CNN when the revolution was happening in Egypt. And reporters were reporting, well, these are the people who want democracy. They are not the Muslim Brotherhood. These are normal people who wanting democracy.
Good evening, everybody.
Even President Obama supported the notion that Egypt's revolution was being fueled by young people in search of freedom, calling them an inspiration to us all.
To the people of Egypt, particularly the young people of Egypt, I want to be clear. We hear your voices.
The story here is quite different than Tunisia. We're not trying to bring down the government. We just want social justice, some freedom, a bit of mercy.
Two major things happened immediately within 2 weeks of that revolution, within the overthrow of Mubarak, that had nothing to do with democracy or the revolution. Sheikh al-Qaradawi, who was banned from Egypt, who's a radical imam, banned from the United States and England as leading terrorist in the world, came back to Egypt to a hero's welcome to give the first sermon, Friday sermon at the Tahrir Square, with 2 million people standing in that square shouting, "We are 2 million martyrs ready to march to death to Jerusalem." Of course, the Western media did not report that.
Al-Qaradawi is the unofficial spiritual and intellectual advisor for the Muslim Brotherhood. He hosts a weekly television show on the Al Jazeera network called Sharia and Life, watched by millions. He is openly anti-Semitic. The leaders of Egypt's youth movements, the supposed instigators of the revolution itself, were not allowed to speak.
ما عليك بهذه الطغمة اليهودية الصهيونية الباغية اللهم لا تبق لهم من باقية اللهم أحصهم عددا طوال التاريخ من يؤدبهم نتيجة إفسادهم آخر تأديب كان تأديب هتلر ما فعل بهم وإن كان مبالغوا في الأمر ما بلغوا ولكن استطاع أن يوقفهم عند حدودهم وكان هذا أدبا إلهيا تأديبا إلهيا عقابا قدريا لهؤلاء والمرة القادمة إن شاء الله ستكون على أيدي المؤمنين.
Having studied some of these connections that most people are not aware of, it turns out that Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi
the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood, who has been living in exile in Qatar over the years, has a big international charity called Union of the Good. The Union of the Good has a network of groups that belong to it. And again, this is a Muslim Brotherhood network. Some of those groups that are in the Union of the Good are simply organizations that funnel money to Hamas, the terrorist organization based in the Gaza Strip, which is recognized as an international terrorist organization by everybody.
Well, I think anybody that believes like the Brotherhood believes in an Islamic state and Sharia and government is a supremacist. Their pathway to God is better. It's not the Islam I was raised with.
The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt in 1928, 5 years after the Islamic Empire ended in Turkey in 1924. From the 600s until 1924, for 1400 years, Islam, the Islamic Empire, ruled and covered more of the earth's surface than the Roman Empire did at its peak.
The Islamic Empire, or Caliphate, was abolished following the defeat of Turkey's Ottoman Empire in World War I. Turkey's president, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, took the bold step of suspending Sharia law, giving women the right to vote, to be educated, and even to wear whatever they wanted to. Not everyone supported the move.
So this group of radicals in Egypt, devout Muslim, we call them now radicals in the West, but devout Muslims following in the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad, said to themselves, we have to resurrect the caliphate. That's when they launched the Muslim Brotherhood.
In all, the Muslim Brotherhood is responsible for the creation of at least 70 Islamic organizations worldwide, including Al-Qaeda. In addition to the Muslim Brotherhood, Iran has made no secret of its own expansionist plans and its belief that a global Islamic empire is a mandate from God. Just a few weeks after violence began in Tunisia and Egypt, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad declared a new world order was imminent.
من به شما اطمینان میدهم گوشاشون رو باز کنند علیرغم همه طراحی‌های پیچیده و شیطانی شما به فضل الهی به لطف هوشمندی و ایستادگی ملت‌ها به زودی خاورمیانه جدید اما بدون آمریکا بدون رژیم صهیونیستی محقق خواهد شد و مستکبران در آن خاورمیانه هیچ جایی نخواهند داشت.
Just as they had with al-Qaradawi's appearance and speech before millions in Egypt, the American media largely ignored Ahmadinejad's call for a new Islamic empire.
Iran is, under its current leadership, is unpredictable. I mean, it's saying, the leaders are saying they're going to attack certain countries, the United States and Israel, but they have designs on Saudi Arabia. They want to control what they believe are the holy sites of Mecca and Medina. They want control of Iraq. Iraq is 80% Shia Muslim, 65, 70% Shia Muslim. They want to control it. They want to control Lebanon. They want to control Syria. They have a vision ultimately of controlling the world.
They are not a status quo regime. They are a revolutionary regime. They are determined to expand Iranian influence across the Middle East, but particularly in the area within the boundaries of the old Safavid Empire from the 16th century. Most people don't know this little secret, but the Persian Empire in the 16th century controlled Baghdad in the west and Herat in Afghanistan in the east. It extended up into Central Asia and down into the Persian Gulf.
Another little-known part of Iran's history is its connection to Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. Prior to World War II, when Iran was still known as Persia, German operatives used Tehran as a base of operation against the British and Jews. Persia's leader, Reza Shah Pahlavi, became an ardent follower of Hitler, and embraced the concept of an Aryan master race. So much so that in 1935 he renamed the country Iran, which in Farsi means Aryan. When the war began, a number of Iranian Nazis joined the fight.
A lot of people aren't aware of the fact that two of the Nazi divisions were actually Muslim divisions. You had an Albanian and a Bosnian division.
While the open embrace of Hitler's style of anti-Semitism may have ended in Iran and the Mideast with the war, its influence did not. Two powerful Arab leaders, Hassan al-Banna and Saeed Qutb, took up the Nazi-like fight against Zionism. Al-Banna was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. Qutb's writings have become the theoretical basis for a number of radical Muslim groups, including Al-Qaeda.
Sort of a third player beside the Muslim Brotherhood and the Iranians is the AKP party in Turkey. Now, that is the party of Prime Minister Erdogan.
Ironically, the greatest threat to Israel and U.S. interest in the Mideast may come from the seat of the last Islamic caliphate, Turkey. NATO member and ally to America, at least publicly. It is the second fastest growing country in the G20, behind only China, and boasts the 10th most powerful military in the world and largest in the Mideast.
The AK party, the Islamist party, people will say it's a moderate party. They have effectively taken over the nation of Turkey. They have taken the presidency, the parliament, the seat of the prime ministership. They just passed a bill which allowed them to rewrite the constitution, which is giving them new, broad, sweeping powers over the military.
The military has been basically hollowed out by this Islamization program. And that regime has become more anti-American, more anti-Israeli, more Islamist, and more threatening.
They've handpicked and placed all of their own Islamist judges into the judiciary. They've taken over the two top media outlets in the nation that were oppositional media outlets. They hit one with a $23 billion tax fine. The Prime Minister's son is now running the second largest media outlet.
Like Iran, Turkey has begun to openly talk about expanding its influence and its borders.
There was a fascinating U.S. cable that came out of the WikiLeaks that I recall in detail. It spoke about the fact that many members of Prime Minister Erdogan's party see or envision a resurrection of an Ottoman-like state in the future, having a much broad regional influence. The foreign minister, Davutoglu, has been speaking about resurrecting spheres of influence for Turkey in the Middle East, in the Balkans, and the Caucasus. These are areas where the Ottoman Empire ruled.
We have in Turkey the rise of the new Adolf Hitler of the Middle East. No one is paying attention. And we're still functioning under the paradigm of 10 years ago. We're still treating Turkey as if they're a wonderful ally. They're becoming allies with Syria, one of the largest and most significant state sponsors of terrorism in the earth.
Perhaps even more ominous, Turkey's deputy prime minister recently suggested that his country and Iran must form an alliance in order to preserve global peace and solve the region's problems. Egypt's current leadership has said the same. According to Ambassador Gold, the unlikely cooperation between Mideast nations has heightened the threat to Israel.
If you go back to the famous Turkish flotilla incident.
Israeli soldiers, as you can see, coming down from the helicopter, they're storming that flotilla, which is reportedly bringing aid and food to the Gaza Strip.
If you look at the mother ship that led the flotilla into the eastern Mediterranean to come to the Gaza Strip and break Israel's blockade of the Gaza terrorist entity, what you find is that there were a large number of members of the Muslim Brotherhood from different Arab countries on board.
One would think this was an armed invasion, but really it's just about 800 activists and 10,000 tons of relief supplies.
There were people there from the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, many of whom were actually members of parliament. There were people there from the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, from Yemen, from North African countries like Morocco or Algeria. And what that pointed to was cooperation between the IHH, the Turkish Islamist organization that purchased the Marmara, the lead ship of the flotilla, and the Muslim Brotherhood. This cooperation was very intimate.
In the mainstream media, we saw the flotilla incident in Israel portrayed as a peace protest. What was not shown in most of the media were these protesters as they were chanting the song Khaybar Khaybar O Yahud, which means, O Jews, remember Khaybar. Khaybar was the Jewish village where Muhammad slaughtered between 700 to 900 Jewish men by cutting off their heads. And these peace protesters were chanting, O Jews, remember Khaybar, the army of Muhammad is coming.
As governments continue to fall or become compromised in the Mideast, new regimes are overcoming their religious and philosophical differences to unite against Israel and increasingly against the United States.
I would say that one of the primary ideas that many of the individuals throughout the Middle East that are rioting, protesting today are looking for is what is called khilafah, the caliphate. Now, this idea of the caliphate, we need to understand, is very much a blank canvas. So if you're a socialist Muslim, it is in the idea of the caliphate that you will find your aspirations of a socialist society. If you're a moderate Muslim, then it is in the idea of the caliphate that you believe that you will achieve a moderate and tolerant yet Islamic world. If you're a radical Muslim, that it is in the idea of the caliphate that you believe that you will find and achieve Islamic dominance over the unbelievers, the establishment of Islamic Sharia law, and ultimately the supremacy of Islam throughout the earth.
They really literally believe that they are commanded to install a global caliphate and that they need to move wherever they are operating in that direction. They're quite confident that they'll win. We think it's fantastical. But if you look at it from their perspective, they say they've already taken down the Soviet Union. They sincerely believe that it's they who did it, and it doesn't seem to them that it's an insurmountable challenge to overthrow the West. In many ways, they think the West is a bit of an easier task for them because they've become very expert in exploiting the freedoms that are available to them here.
Let me make this clear. They have agents in the U.S. They have infiltrated our society deeply.
Reza Khalili is not this man's real name. His identity is being protected because he claims to have been part of Iran's Revolutionary Guard and later an informant for the CIA.
As they've said before, there are 800 sensitive sites in U.S. That they have their eyes on. They are sending people through the border of Mexico and U.S. They are collaborating with Hezbollah in Latin America. They are collaborating with drug cartels to ship arms. And they're getting ready for a confrontation with U.S. But something you might find interesting, the Revolutionary Guards did a test of a missile launch from a ship. And the only purpose of such a test would be to launch a missile close to our waters and detonate a nuclear bomb over U.S., which would then have a EMP effect, paralyzing the country.
The unlikely alliances forming between nations against Israel and the United States are one of the most troubling aspects of current events around the world. For those who believe we are living in the last days, it's one of the strongest pieces of evidence. Author Joel Rosenberg points to the book of Ezekiel.
What intrigues me about Ezekiel 38 and 39, what Bible scholars call the War of Gog and Magog, is that while it was written more than 2,500 years ago, there are so many events that are happening right now and have been happening over the last decade or so that are eerily similar to the events that the Bible says will happen.
Those two chapters are probably the most explicit, lengthy, and detailed prophecies in the Old Testament.
For example, the text indicates that Russia will form a military, political, economic alliance with Persia, the country we now know as Iran. Well, the Russians and the Iranians have hated each other for centuries. There's never been an alliance between Russia and Iran the way there is today in the 2,500 years since the prophecy was written.
The Iranian envoy to the International Atomic Energy Agency claims Tehran is ready for a nuclear fuel swap deal with Moscow.
It is causing a lot of media attention, of course, as Iran is under a lot of sanctions from the United Nations.
We are seeing a whole new power system that's being built and developed, and allies coming together. The communist regimes, the North Koreans, South America, you've got Hugo Chavez and these people working together with dictators, with the bureaucracies in Iran. And you see evil people building alliances together, trying to counterbalance the United States and the West. And it's happening so fast.
This is Venezuelan president's third visit to Iran since President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad took office.
President Ahmadinejad met with his close ally, President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, on the final leg of his Latin American tour.
What people don't understand about Islam, and particularly Islamist ideology, part of the reason that it works so seamlessly with the left is that it's virulently anti-capitalist. If you read the major theorists of Islamist ideology, they actually think the communists are much more closer to the truth than capitalists are.
What's interesting is that Turkey is supposed to join this Russian-Iranian alliance against Israel in the last days. Although, for many of the years that I've been teaching this, people said, well, now Turkey, let's not be ridiculous. They're a NATO ally, a friend of Israel, tens of thousands of Israelis vacation in Turkey. I mean, people just didn't see a Turkish enmity towards Israel anywhere in the future. But now we're at a place where Turkey has swung dramatically in the last several years, has become very hostile to Israel, and has become very close to both Russia and Iran.
Rosenberg is also watching the goings-on in war-torn Libya very closely.
Libya is a very central and prominent player in the prophecies of Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's going to be one of the countries that joins Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, and others in attacking Israel in the last days.
When we see the collapse in Arabic countries, we didn't think all this is going to happen within 10 years since September 11th, and it has happened. I actually believe the next 3 years will decide the direction of this world, and it's not looking pretty right now.
The nation of Israel appears as a tiny sliver of earth on the map of the Mideast. It is roughly the size of the state of New Jersey, America's fifth smallest in terms of geographic territory. The terrorist group Hezbollah controls Lebanon to its immediate north. Turkey, perhaps its greatest threat, lies further north across the Mediterranean Sea. Egypt, now unfriendly, is to its west, and Iran, whose leadership has promised to wipe Israel off the map, sits just off to the east. Uneasy relationships in Syria and Jordan are in danger as unrest grows in those countries, as it does in Libya, Yemen, and U.S.-friendly Bahrain.
Israel is surrounded by enemies right now. It's getting worse, and countries that have peace treaties with Israel now are on rocky soil, on rocky ground. It's a dangerous moment. I believe the most dangerous moment in a generation for Israel, and the Bible says it's going to get worse.
It is also not confined to a narrow period of time. It's not going to be over by the summer of 2011. This could go on for a considerable period.
It wouldn't surprise me one bit if I woke up tomorrow and read that rockets are being launched towards Tel Aviv. It's coming. Israel knows it. We know it. Those of us who follow this, who live and breathe this subject as our profession and our expertise, know exactly it's coming.
There is a sacred tradition in Islam, and it is a trustworthy, reliable tradition. And it says, the day of resurrection will not come until the Muslims fight against the Jews, until there are only a few Jews left hiding themselves behind a tree or a rock. And then that tree or rock will cry out and say, "Oh, faithful Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him."
Radical Islam certainly will not stop until they see Israel wiped off the map, or at least they feel that is part of their goal. And I say part of because their bigger goal is also global domination. And Israel stands in the way of that global domination of radical Islam.
In a plot twist so strange it's hard to believe, Christians, Jews, and Muslims all trace their lineage to the same man, Abraham, and their physical roots to the same place, Jerusalem. The religions believe in many of the same prophets, and even the basic framework of many key prophecies.
Obviously you had Abraham, who's the father of Isaac and Ishmael. Now on Isaac's side, he was the father of Jacob, who became Israel, and obviously that's the father of the Jewish faith. And then on the other side you had Ishmael, and then you also had Edom, or Esau, and it was out of those individuals on that side of the Abrahamic family that many of the Middle Eastern nationalities derive from. Now Muhammad, the founder of Islam, claims to have been a direct descendant 2,600 years after Ishmael.
It's interesting because we all share that common rootage. As a matter of fact, there is an exhibit at the New York Public Library called The Three Faiths, and three faiths all beginning with Abraham, so to speak.
Jews, Christians, Muslims all point to Jerusalem as the epicenter of their faith, and they all believe that that is where all history will wind up, in part because Abraham was touched by God there, was spoken to and communicated with God there.
All the three major religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, believe in the return or in the coming of a Messiah that is going to bring peace, where peace is going to reign supreme on earth.
But who the Messiah is and how that peace is achieved is very much in dispute. The Jewish faith believes the Messiah will be human and will oversee a period of great transformation on earth.
There will be a resurrection of the dead. There will be the return of justice. There will be true peace amongst all peoples. The rebuilding of the temple will take place. Now there are those who take a bit of a different stance and say, well, it's going to happen through human development, not necessarily in the hands of one person, but collectively it will take place.
The messianic beliefs of Christians and Muslims represent a sort of anti-parallel. Similar stories told from very different perspectives, with very different outcomes.
I think of it as a photographic negative of each other.
Christians believe the returning Messiah will be Jesus Christ. Islam's savior is the Mahdi, who will emerge as the Pope, President, and General of the world.
According to the Bible, the Antichrist revives an empire According to Islamic end-time view, the Mahdi revives an Islamic empire.
In the Bible, the Old Testament prophet Daniel says the Antichrist will set up his seat of authority on the Temple Mount in Israel and will actively persecute and martyr Jews as his enemies. Islam teaches the Mahdi will operate from the same Temple Mount in Jerusalem and will cause Jews and other non-believers to either convert to Islam or die.
On the biblical side, the Antichrist will specifically use the method of beheading to martyr his enemies, to destroy his enemies. On the Islamic side, it's within the Quran that says, strike the necks of the unbelievers. Some translations actually say, behead the unbelievers.
Revelation 13 says, the Antichrist will have an assistant, a false prophet. It refers to him as a dragon in the clothing of a ram or a lamb.
On the Islamic side, Muslims believe that Jesus returns. Again, they call him Isa al-Masih. He comes back as an assistant to the Mahdi. And he tells all of the Christians of the world, your Bible is corrupt. I never claimed to be the Son of God. I never died on the cross. The Christian religion is false. Islam is the true religion, and you need to follow the Mahdi.
The biblical Antichrist will reign for 7 years. The Mahdi, 7 years. Both religions talk about a mark of the beast. Christians believe it will be put on the forehead, wrist, or forearm of those who follow the Antichrist. Only those with the mark will be allowed to buy or sell goods. The Bible teaches that anyone taking the mark will ultimately be cast into hell.
Muslims have borrowed this concept of the mark of the beast. Muslims actually teach this individual known as the Dabat al-Ard. He is the beast of the earth. It comes up out of the earth. They believe he will be a literal beast, and it says that he will mark the foreheads of all true Muslim believers. So on the Islamic side, Muslims are actually hoping to be marked with the mark of the beast.
The Islamic faith also believes in an Antichrist figure called Ad-Dajjal al-Masih. It refers to him as the false Jewish Messiah or Jewish king who returns claiming to be the Son of God, claiming to be Jesus Christ. And the anti-parallel continues.
So when you look at Revelation 19, this is really the quintessential picture of the return of Jesus in the Bible. He bursts forth from heaven on a white horse. He's followed by the armies of heaven. And then it says the kings of the earth gather together to make war against him. And you ask yourself, you say, what in the world are they thinking? This supernatural man just burst forth from heaven, and they think they can defeat him. Well, when you understand Islamic eschatology, you understand these kings will actually believe that Jesus is the Dajjal, the Antichrist, and they will believe that it is their divine destiny to kill him.
Richardson believes the Muslim people have been set up by their own belief system to fulfill the prophecies of the Bible, believing they are following their Savior, when in fact, they'll be following the biblical Antichrist. Almost all of those who practice one of the three religions agree that only God knows the day and the hour of the return of the Messiah. There is one extremely vocal and increasingly powerful group that has a different view.
Almighty Lord, I pray to you to hasten the emergence of your last repository, the promised one, that perfect and pure human being.
Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, along with other key leadership, are believed to belong to a secret Islamic movement that they believe can determine when their Messiah returns.
What is different in modern Iran today is the rise of Mahdist or Messianic groups, like the Hojatiya organization, which believes that man can accelerate the arrival of this Messianic era, the arrival of the Mahdi. It's not some preordained date in the future, because many religions have an end of times concept. It's something that man can move forward himself. But the way to move that forward is to spread global chaos.
Because they take it literally from the Quran. Glorification of Allah is their ultimate goal, glorification of Islam, and the conquest of Islam, of the whole world. And they believe that they are mandated by Allah to create the circumstances which would then have the last Shiite Imam, the last Messiah, reappear and kill the rest of the infidels and expand the Islamic rule throughout the world.
This is what's driving their nuclear development program, and they believe they are appointed, Ahmadinejad and the people of Iran, and especially the mullahs, to usher in and bring back the Messiah through an apocalyptic disaster throughout the world.
Recently, I revealed that the Iranian scientists have been sent to North Korea for a third nuclear bomb test jointly with North Korea, financed by Iran.
A scheduled test confirmed by the South Korean intelligence agency, but ultimately delayed by the earthquake and tsunami in Japan. Khalili has no doubt about Iran's intent.
It's very difficult for the people in the West to understand this ideology because they see the world through a lens which is logical, which in that world human beings don't destroy themselves to destroy others. But I'm here to tell you that the Iranian regime truly believes that it's representing Allah's demands. And not only they don't care about the people of the world, as they call it, the infidels, they really don't care about the Iranian people either. They've said it openly. Even if 20 million Iranians are fried in a nuclear exchange, it's well worth it to destroy Israel.
There is building evidence Ahmadinejad and Khamenei believe their time to act is rapidly approaching. Further evidence comes in the form of a new film produced by a group called Conductors of the Coming in collaboration with President Ahmadinejad.
روایات شریف تحولات و بقایای کشورهای مختلف خاورمیانه و ایران را در عصر ظهور به خوبی بیان فرمودند. ما در این قسمت به بررسی این تحولات می‌پردازیم.
According to Khalili, the film has been approved by the Iranian government for distribution throughout the Middle East. It is their hope that it will provoke even more uprisings in the region and throughout the world.
They want to become the final empire. Their belief is that once the world is a global caliphate, that will be the end of these sorts of civilizational struggles, that it will be a permanent fixture of humanity, that Islam will rule the world.
There is a dramatic push and a movement to build that caliphate, and I believe that a lot of the chaos and uprisings and wars and revolutions that are going on in the Middle East today are efforts by radicals to build that caliphate.
It is frightening to me when I look at the big picture and understand what's coming down the pipeline.
All of that is consistent, interestingly enough, with biblical end times theology, where Jesus said there would be wars and rumors of wars, revolutions and uprisings, persecution and lawlessness. So one of the differences, however, is that Jesus never told us to be responsible for those wars, rumors of wars, revolutions and uprisings.
When we look at all that's taking place in the earth today and we compare that to the list of specific events that will take place in the last days, what the Bible calls the birth pains, then it definitely seems as though these things are increasing far more than they have been in recent years.
The signs of travail, or the birth pains as the King James renders it, is an indication that we should look for other signs. And interestingly enough, there have been all kinds of signs.
Contraction and release. What Jesus is describing is that these contractions, these natural disasters and man-made disasters of war and terrorism and persecution, these are going to get worse, and then they'll release a little bit, and then they'll get bad again, and they'll release it again. And that pattern is what you're looking for when you want to see whether Bible prophecy is coming true in your lifetime. And I believe we're seeing that in our lifetime. Now, are we close to the final delivery, as it were, of the return of Jesus Christ? I have no idea. I wouldn't guess. All I can tell you is, starting in the late 19th century up to the present, we've seen contraction and release, contraction and release on a scale so enormous that people call these things World War I, World War II. Now in this age of war with radical Islam, people are talking about World War III. We are seeing these contractions get worse.
Radical madmen aside, what was it that led the Islamic faith, born from the same lineage, to take an end times position seemingly at odds with both Judaism and Christianity? History would seem to provide an answer. Some 640 years after the death and resurrection of Christ, a 40-year-old merchant and shepherd declared himself God's last prophet and messenger on earth.
According to Islamic history, Muhammad went into the cave of Hira to fast and pray as he did each year. And this particular year, as he was in the cave, this very powerful presence came over him. And it literally choked him to the point where he felt as though he was going to die. This is the beginning of the inspiration of the book that we know as the Quran. There are two periods of Muhammad's life. There is the Meccan period and the Medinian period. In simple terms, during the Meccan period, Muhammad tried to use sugar to win converts. He tried to be very sweet and tolerant and accepting of Jews and Christians.
According to Richardson, it was at Medina that things changed. Muhammad gained thousands of new followers, and as a result, significant power. But his legitimacy was challenged by many of the Jewish rabbis who refused to accept him as a Messiah or messenger from God.
He began to become very violent, very imperialistic, very demanding, very intolerant, extremely anti-Semitic during this period.
Eventually, Muhammad and his army conquered and drove out all of the Jewish tribes in Medina. The last bloody battle, resulting in the beheadings of hundreds of Jews in the village of Haibar.
Because when you look at the history and the recent history of Islamic radicalism, under the banner of Islam, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, there is no God greater than Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. These are the words you see on the Saudi flags. These are the words you see on the Hezbollah flags. This is the Islamic motto. And under that banner, Muslims massacred Jews in Israel. They massacred Christians in Lebanon, killed Copts in Egypt, Assyrians in Syria, Hindus in India, Armenians in Turkey.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, sees the circumstances, if not the end results, differently.
Islam did not come to convert Christians and Jews.
Jasser says the history books don't tell the full story. He says the intent of Muhammad was to convert the pagans of Arabia. But along the way, his message was perverted and co-opted by radical sects for political gain. He points to radical Wahhabism and the Muslim Brotherhood as classic examples.
It has to do with the fact that Islam, I think similar to Christianity, needs to go through a reformation and enlightenment like we saw the West go through before the creation of America and our founding documents and our founding fathers and what they did. And that revolution of thought has not happened in the Muslim consciousness. We've not separated mosque and state. I think one of the things that's misunderstood is we view the battle against Islamic theocracy in Iran or against the Taliban, against the Wahhabis, against Al-Qaeda. We view that from sitting in America as Islam versus the West, or Islam versus Israel, or Islam versus Christians or Jews or non-Muslims. It's actually a battle within the House of Islam. It's a civil war of ideas that we need to have to help freedom-loving Muslims separate mosque and state.
One of the most mysterious aspects of biblical end-times prophecy is the apparent absence of any role played by the United States.
The number one question that I get asked when I teach around, certainly the United States, but around the world about Bible prophecy is, what happens to the United States? Where are we in end-times Bible prophecy? And the honest answer is, we're not there.
I've studied all of the prophecies, and I read many of the articles of different people and books who offer suggestions, but I do not find anything in the scripture that guarantees that the United States is there.
Particularly vexing, considering this country's history of being the world's bastion of hope and aid during times of global crisis. The consummate combination of superpower and angel of mercy.
It means something's going to happen.
We may not be a superpower.
Now, there's a range of possible scenarios, one of which would be an economic collapse.
How can this country expect to be the 21st century superpower if it owes everybody money? We're doing to ourselves what you would expect our enemies to do. Our ability to protect our allies in places like Europe or places like the Middle East, like Israel, is severely impaired if our economy is in recession. You know what? American people are going to say, we can't worry about Israel right now. We've got our own problems. And so that's, I think, the real danger is that if we suffer this, if our economy is impaired, our enemies see that as weakness. And that's when they're most likely to act.
Both Moore and Rosenberg point to the decline of the U.S. dollar as an ominous sign, a significant loss of status in the world order.
There is such distrust now, so many questions about the strength and the solidity of the dollar, that you've got many countries, including major world powers, particularly in Europe, saying we should just create an entire new single currency that the entire world could use.
That's a bad sign for the United States, and I think it will be one of the signals that we are an empire in decline if that happens.
That whole topic used to be in the realm of Bible prophecy teachers only and was considered bizarre. Now it's the stuff of the G20, Russia, and others.
The United States' continued dependence on foreign oil, made worse by the virtual freezing of new drilling and exploration domestically, is a constant threat.
Right now, 6 countries control 60% of the world oil. These countries happen to be in the Middle East, ruled by Arab dictators.
I think this has been a plot, quite frankly, but by some of the more radical environmentalists to intentionally try to grind the American economy to a halt.
Dramatic pictures of a police car that's been burning now for about 15 minutes.
They have surrounded this Tea Party protest, and you do have police officers keeping the two sides apart, basically.
America has become so polarized.
We really need to bring China into the creation of a new world order.
That's not a recipe for a common ground. That's a recipe for a battleground.
President Obama suffers from the most polarized situation in Washington that we've ever seen, even maybe in the time of Abraham Lincoln and the initiation of the war between the states.
We find that we're on a mad race to destroy this country. And unfortunately, that could make us nothing at the end time.
I mean, history has shown that any civilization or community that does not continually renew its values and understand what its foundational principles are will ultimately see its own demise.
You know, somebody once said those who close their eyes never see tears. I don't think we should be blind to what is taking place in this country, the battles within the country, and take a stand. We don't also have the luxury of being cowards.
You know, my recommendation is that the people who hear this, who study it, would act and not hide or not ignore what's coming, but to look to the Bible and say, How does the Bible teach me to live? Because there's a lot of practical guidance from the Lord of how to live in the last days.
There's a well-known statement that if you're planting a tree and someone tells you the Messiah is behind you, keep planting the tree. Now you would think I should turn around and welcome the Messiah. And tradition says no. You have to be involved in that mitzvah, in that good deed, planting, perpetuating human life right now. The Messiah will happen, but your responsibility is the here and now.
As we look out at all that's taking place in the world, it certainly seems as though we are approaching that day. But when people ask how close, I have to punt to the prophet Isaiah and say the day of the Lord is near. This prophetic imperative has been in existence for thousands of years, and it's there to keep those that are sober, those that are watchful, alert, that we would live in a state of readiness at all times. We are to live with an urgency and an expectation as if tomorrow could be our last. And the truth is, my last days could come tomorrow. Your last days could come tomorrow.
I think the message that God told us years ago rings true today. He says, I give you a choice, life and death. Choose life. And I would hope that we look back at the words of the prophets, the writing of the Torah, the writings of other traditions that speak of peace, that speak of justice, and say that if all of us will work together, walking on separate paths, but ultimately trying to achieve a place where we can live together, this will be a better world. The prophet was right then, the prophet is right today.